I discovered why my best friend's family disappeared 15 years ago. Growing up, Sophie was more than just my best friend. She was the sister I never had. We became inseparable the moment we met in third grade. We spent nearly every day together at school, most weekends at each other's houses, and our families even went on vacation together twice. Her parents treated me like their third daughter, and my parents adored Sophie just as much. That's why it was so shocking when her entire family vanished without a word during our first year of middle school. At 12 years old, their sudden disappearance left me completely devastated. Their house emptied overnight. No goodbye, no explanation, no forwarding address. Sophie never came back to school. Their phones were disconnected. All our mutual friends were just as confused as I was. My parents reached out to her parents but found nothing. Even the school administration claimed that they had no information about where the family had gone. The Martinez family had simply vanished into thin air. Those 15 years of confusion and hurt never went away. I created countless stories in my head about why they left. Maybe her dad received a secret job offer. Maybe they entered witness protection. Maybe there was a family emergency. As I got older, I checked social media constantly, searching every platform I could think of for any trace of Sophie or her family. Her older sister Maria wasn't online either. It was as if they never existed. Yesterday, I finally learned the truth, and I wish I hadn't. While visiting my parents in my hometown, I ran into Sophie's old next-door neighbor, Mrs. Chen, at the grocery store. She's elderly now, but still sharp as ever. After catching up briefly, she gave me a strange look and asked if I ever discovered why the Martinez family left. When I said no, she hesitated before revealing something she'd kept secret all these years. Mrs. Chen told me that about a week before they disappeared, she overheard Sophie's parents arguing late at night through their open window. They were discussing moving immediately because Sophie faced severe bullying at school. Someone had spread deeply personal information about Sophie's older sister Maria that put both girls in danger. The whole family received threats. They no longer felt safe in our small town. My blood turned to ice as Mrs. Chen continued speaking. The story she described, the one spread about Maria, was painfully familiar because I was the one who spread it. The memory crashed over me with sickening clarity. During a sleepover at Sophie's house, I found her diary. It had fallen from between her mattress and bed frame during a pillow fight. While she used the bathroom, I opened it, telling myself I was just curious about what my best friend wrote. Inside, I read about how Maria had confided in Sophie that she was questioning her sexuality and had feelings for her female best friend. Excited to have juicy gossip, I told just one person at school, swearing them to secrecy. At 12 years old, I couldn't comprehend the weight of what I was sharing. That single piece of gossip blazed through our small conservative town like wildfire. Within days, Maria faced harassment at her high school. Sophie started getting bullied too. Their parents received hateful calls and letters. Mrs. Chen heard their mum crying almost every night that final week. She witnessed strange cars driving slowly past their house. She found cruel notes in their mailbox. She watched Sophie's dad installing security cameras mere days before they disappeared. The weight of my actions hit me like a physical blow. My childhood betrayal of Sophie's trust hadn't just ended our friendship, it had completely destroyed her family's life in our town. They hadn't simply moved away, they had fled, all because of me. I barely made it to my car after excusing myself from Mrs. Chen. Every memory shifted in that moment. I wasn't the abandoned friend anymore, I was the reason they left. My thoughtless actions as a child caused tremendous pain and harm to people I claimed to care about. Sophie, Maria, their entire family lost their home, their friends, their community, all because I wanted to share some gossip. This past day has been nothing but sickness and guilt, looking through old photos and remembering all the ways Sophie stood by me while I betrayed her so completely. I've considered trying to find her online again, to apologize, but what could I possibly say? Sorry I outed your sister and forced your family to flee town? No apology could ever suffice. The damage I caused can't be undone with mere words. This secret weighs on me like a mountain. My parents still mention how sad it was that the Martinez family left so suddenly, not knowing their daughter caused everything. I can never tell them. I can never tell anyone except strangers on the internet who don't know me. The guilt and shame are overwhelming. I was just a child who didn't understand the consequences, but that doesn't change the devastating impact my actions had on people I claim to care about. I carry that knowledge now, and the guilt consumes me. Every news story about hate crimes or bullying reminds me of what I did. Every incident of someone being outed against their will brings back the pain I caused. Some childhood mistakes can never be made right. All we can do is carry them and try to become better people. I desperately wish I could tell Sophie and her family how deeply sorry I am. I wish I could go back and stop my 12-year-old self, but I can't. I can only live with the knowledge that I destroyed my best friend's life through a single betrayal of trust, hoping that wherever they are now, they've found peace and acceptance far from the chaos I created. Story number 2. I'm the reason my school's library burned down. The local newspaper just announced that they're finally rebuilding the old library wing of Marshall Middle School. Everyone in town is celebrating, talking about how great it will be to restore that historic piece of our community. But I feel sick to my stomach, because 20 years ago, I'm the one who burned it down. Our town isn't very big, and that library was its heart. The building dated back to 1893, and over the generations, it became more than just a school library. It housed our town's entire historical archive, family records going back to the town's founding, old photographs documenting our community's growth, historical documents and letters from the original settlers, handwritten journals from our town's earliest days. The local historical society used it as their base, and they'd collected treasures from every major family in town. I was 13 when it happened. 8th grade, I'd started smoking to look cool, stealing cigarettes from my older brother's room. Finding places to smoke at school was tricky, but I discovered this hidden corner in the old library wing, behind some tall shelves in the historical archive section. Almost no one ever went back there. The wooden shelves reached the ceiling, creating this perfect hidden spot where I could light up without getting caught. That Friday afternoon, I had a particularly stressful day. 3 failed tests and a fight with my best friend. I snuck into my smoking spot during last period, desperate for a cigarette to calm down. Usually I was careful about making sure the cigarette was completely out, crushing it thoroughly and taking the butt with me. But that day, I was upset and rushing. The bell rang for final dismissal, and I quickly stubbed out the cigarette against the shelf, dropping it into what I thought was a metal waste bin. It wasn't metal, it was wooden, like everything else in that historic wing, and I hadn't stubbed out the cigarette properly. I left school with everyone else that day, not knowing what I'd done. It wasn't until after dinner that we heard the sirens. So many sirens. From my bedroom window, I could see the orange glow in the sky. My mom turned on the local news, and I watched in horror as flames engulfed the entire library wing. The fire department later determined that the fire started in the historical archive section, exactly where I'd been smoking. They said the old wood and paper created the perfect conditions for the flames to spread rapidly. By the time they contained the fire, everything was gone. Generations of irreplaceable history reduced to ashes. The whole town mourned. I watched elderly residents cry on TV, talking about family documents that could never be replaced. The Historical Society lost everything they'd spent decades collecting. Schools across the state had used our archives for research projects, but now it was all gone. Local families lost records tracing their heritage back hundreds of years. My parents attended the community meetings about the fire. They came home talking about how devastating this loss was for our town's heritage. My dad's own family had documents in that archive going back 5 generations, all destroyed. I sat there at dinner, eating silently, the guilt consuming me from inside. The investigation never found the cause. They suspected faulty wiring, given the building's age. The case remained open but unsolved. Insurance eventually paid out, but the money sat unused because the town couldn't agree on how to rebuild. How do you replace something that precious? For 20 years, I've carried this secret. I watched my town grieve. I listened to my teachers talk about the cultural tragedy. I sat through school assemblies about the importance of preserving history. Every year on the anniversary of the fire, the local paper runs stories about what was lost. The older residents still tear up talking about it. My brother apologized to me years later for leaving his cigarettes where I could take them. He never knew I took them. He blamed himself for smoking as a teenager, saying it set a bad example. That just added another layer to my guilt. I've tried to make up for it in small ways. I donate to the Historical Society every year. I volunteered countless hours helping them try to rebuild their collection from other sources. I became passionate about historical preservation, even majoring in archives management in college. Every project I work on preserving historical documents fills me with a desperate need to protect what remains of our past. But none of that can bring back what was lost. Those records, those photographs, those irreplaceable pieces of history, they're gone forever because a stupid 13-year-old couldn't wait to smoke a cigarette. Every time someone mentions rebuilding the library wing, I remember everything that can never be rebuilt. Sometimes I think about confessing, but what good would it do now? It wouldn't bring back the archives, it would just hurt my family and disappoint my community. My parents are respected members of the town. Learning their son destroyed an irreplaceable piece of our heritage would devastate them. So I carry this burden alone, letting it eat away at me year after year. When they break ground on the new library wing next month, I'll be there with everyone else pretending to celebrate. But inside, I'll be remembering that scared 13-year-old boy running away from his still-lit cigarette, not knowing he was about to destroy generations of history. Some mistakes follow you forever. Some things can never be fixed, no matter how much you wish you could go back and change them. All you can do is try to protect what remains and hope that somehow the weight of your guilt counts as penance for what you destroyed.